Because we are humans and not robots, we have the ability to forget. So the memory that we have fades in and out. But I'm still in the childhood place that I grew up in. So the memories are all around me, but there's blanks. So I'm interested in those blanks, and I'm interested in storytelling, which is one part truth and one part invention. I studied animals and their anatomy a lot and studied the sharks underwater. That was really fun because when I studied them, I was on the ocean floor looking up. And so that was my favorite view of them. But they were in the DeCordova Museum in Massachusetts for a long time, hanging from trees. This is Go-Go Dancer. She's got a little jig that she does. The story was about this little village in Russia, and someone was playing the fiddle, and all the older ladies of the village came out and danced. Vinyl Haven turns out to be an incredible source for really old chairs. I scored with a gorgeous rocking chair yesterday. Because what happens is, again, it's that memory thing where they belong to their great-grandparents or their grandparents. And it's been up in the attic and the cane is gone. And then they find out that there's an artist who's gonna do something else with it. So I've gotten some real treasures from people. Some of them I can't bear to bust up. Our house here, when we got it in early 60s, everything was was still in the house, and it's still there. We still have all the books of illustrated children's stories. So I think I'm kind of still stuck into that period of those children's books and those fairy tales. 1963, my father, who was a math teacher, he wanted summers off with the family, so we got this place. It's pretty rustic, but we were able to be very feral as kids. It was just a great childhood because there were no rules, and you just come back at dinner time and had been in the woods all day or in the stone quarries. When I decided to go to college, I went to a university that had a good crew team, a women's rowing team. I did that for about a year. It was very intense. And then I switched full-time to the art department in that university. And that art department was a traditional program that studied the figure in all disciplines. And that was really good for me because I learned about direct observation, and I learned about anatomy, and they really taught you how to draw. And it gave me a lot of confidence as an artist. But when I graduated from there, I swore I would never do another figure again. But I still had that love for anatomy, so that's when I started actually going to places and researching animals in their natural habitat, and then creating these sort of animal landscape installations, and had some really great adventures. The first one we did was on the island of Rhum in the Inner Hebrides of Scotland. And these goats were there that were left behind by sharecrofters in the 1800s, but they continue to survive. They inhabited caves at low tide. So it was a really amazing place to do research. I could sort of hide behind rocks and document the hierarchy of the grouping of the animals, and then I would get to sort of tell the story when I came back with creating an environment that they would exist in that would sort of tell the story of what it felt like to be on that island and investigating these creatures. They had really fantastic horns and two kinds of hair, very, very hairy, to keep them protected from the cold and the wind. So they were pretty gnarly creatures, and I just loved looking at them and drawing from them. Another one that I did was the longhorn cattle in Texas, and they are amazing because they have horns that go out almost 10 feet. But they have a real sense of where those tips are, as they move around. And I got to study them in 2 ranches in Texas. And one was owned by Dory Damuth, who was Mrs. U.S. Savings Bond 1972. She was a great character, such a lovely person, and her husband was a rodeo clown. She would take me out to the fields where she had the cattle, and in her Cadillac, and I would sit and draw from these very sweet, docile, gigantic beasts. When I came back, I created an installation of one of the longhorns in a bedroom, and it was called Broken Sleep. It's like waking up in the middle of the night and the world changes. Those were all started with welded armatures, and I wanted to work with more non-toxic materials, so I just would go up to the attic and found chairs and busted them up, and that became a structure, because I like to work with understructures and then build up on that, often using recycled material, tire treads or rubber or unraveled sweaters, things like that. But the chairs serve that purpose practically, but then they also tell a story that can be interesting to kind of pursue. But I never really know what is going to happen, and it's all part of a process that evolves through lots of time and failure, and some successes and more failures, and so it's a lot of back and forth. But I like that struggle seems to be part of who I am. As the process goes through in making the sculpture, I often get stuck, and so I need to go and draw from the sculpture and see how far I've kind of gotten, and in that change with a different perspective of different kind of mark making, I can maybe see my way through, hopefully, to a solution that I'm trying to find. My mother grew up in Mexico, and her father was a mining engineer, and he was hired in the 1910s to go to abandoned mines that the Spanish had left behind to see if they were viable for silver. And he wrote stories about it. And a lot of it was the witchcraft and mythology and things like that. And so I did spend some time in Mexico City at the Anthropology Museum, and I found these, they almost seem like comic books, but they are manuscripts of written stories of the Mayans and Aztecs. And they're in a very linear format, a very sort of strict linear format that goes from left to right, but also they're ones that go up and down. And they tell the story of the bloodlines of these rulers. They're very graphic. They have wonderful color to them. And they're exceedingly strange and somewhat violent, of course. I was very inspired by them, not just with the palette, which I definitely was inspired by, but just the shapes of these symbols. And they're kind of like pictograms. So that's what started these initial pieces where there's a shape, and then within that shape are little stories or stages. I really do love the concept of a stage, and I like the curtain behind it. I like the curtain in front of it. And I like things being open to see in and then closed again. I like the theatricality of like opera. I've also really loved puppets and puppet theaters. And that's part of the animatronics, the interest in the animatronics to make something move within a stage. There's a reality that you're able to jump into even though you know it's not real. So my father was a math teacher. He was one of those tall, silent guys who spent a lot of time filling notebooks with mathematical formulas and problems and solving those problems. So he saw that piece that I made where these dogs are cloning themselves with a machine that I made, with a shredding machine. And the dogs are, the buddies are putting unraveled sweaters into the machine, and they're coming out onto a dog who's on a treadmill. When he saw that, he said, "Oh, okay, I get it. It's nanomagic." Okay, that makes sense. It's not logical, but it's nanomagic. There's too much art in the world, honestly. So I recycle a lot. In collaboration with the Mystic Aquarium, I did these really large lionfish. They were so big, and I just could not store them, and there were so many components to them. So they went to the scrapyard. And I think it's important to be able to let go of things. I love it when someone wants to put it in their house. That's wonderful. I have no problem with that. Although sometimes I was like, oh, well, that was my favorite piece. Well, that's okay. I have abandoned ideas, certainly. And I think that's part of the process. You just say, okay, it's not working, just move on. I did that with fruit bats. Where I made the fruit bats, I really liked the idea. I thought I'd go to Australia and look at the fruit bats. But I made one, and I just thought, too scary or too something. So I abandoned it. But I still have the memory of it up there, where it's an example of something that didn't work, and you need those around.